And Mike, welcome to the show. I'm excited about your new book you got coming out. So when's the release date?
First of all, thanks for having me on the show. The release date is November 30th, 2021, depending on when you're listening to this episode.
That's awesome. The book is exciting. I'm excited about reading it. What was the driver for you and got you into this idea?
The longest short story is that I've been wanting to write a book for a long, long time. I was an English major in college, although I don't think I was destined ever to be a writer, but I thought, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I started writing down things, and I thought one day, I'm going to be an author and I'm going to make a career out of being an author. And then, work got in the way and family got in the way and my mind got in the way. And, I would do little spurts, Anthony, and then I would stop, and I had no organization to it, nothing. And then when I sold my first business in 2015, I thought, okay, this is finally the opportunity, right? So you'd think, well, I got to work and I just cranked this thing out. But no, I dragged my feet for another couple of years, letting all other things get in the way. But in 2019, I wrote a goal to write the book in 2020. And what I needed was really some help to help me organize my thoughts and organize my process and that kind of thing. So I hired a coach at Scribe Media, which is a fantastic company for anybody who's wants to write a book, Scribe Media. And they basically put together all of the outline for what I needed to do to take this book from the idea all the way through, Anthony. So I wrote the whole book. They didn't write the book at all, but they really provided me with the system and the structure. And so I started that in April, and then I finished it earlier this year. So it took a long time, even though I had a lot of stuff written and all that. And there, it's just like anything. I went down one path, then that wasn't the path that was right for the book. Right. I went down another, and you know how it goes. So finally, I finished it earlier this year, and then, through editing everything, it's going to come out November 30th. So yeah, it's been a very long process, but I'm really happy to be here. It's like it's like finishing anything. It feels really good to finish something.
Look, everybody has ideas. I'm writing an idea that I've been putting together. It's called 10,000 People I Sat Next to, right? It's about my travels and sitting in airplanes, and I sit next to people, and every single person I've ever sat next to has this story. But the idea about writing this out is an idea, right? And sitting down, and I've written notes, and I've got it started. But just like you were talking about, I can't tell you how many times I've been stopped by it. And all of a sudden, you're in a practice of writing every day. And then all of a sudden life takes over and you got a new thing going on or a new business going on or something that takes you out. And it feels a lot like working out for me. When I'm in a practice, it's great. And then all of a sudden I get out of practice and it's hard to get my rear end from the couch back to working out again, right? That's the hardest part about the workout is getting back into it. And I think that, what you talked about is getting some outside help, getting a coach, someone to help you stay in integrity, someone who helps, kind of be your integrity coach and maybe even help sort out some of the thinking, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Great point. Yeah. So with the program that I was in, you write. They have a call every week to support you. You get, a couple of calls with editors along the way if you're stuck and that kind of thing. And like I mentioned to you, I was going down one path and then, I changed. Well, that first change came from a call with somebody who actually knows what they're doing. They know how to put a story together. They know how things should make sense. And when I told them, what I was doing, they were like, maybe, and they gave me a suggestion to go a different way, which was a better way that I wouldn't have seen on my own. So yeah, having it, coach in business, coach in sports, coach in life, coach in writing.
I was with a little old lady yesterday, and she was telling me this story, right? And it made me laugh. She goes, my granddaughter came over to me and gave me these necklaces that were all kind of in a knot. And her name is Carol. And Carol's, she goes, they were all in a knot, and I kind of looked at them and I pulled them, and I realized the more I pulled, the more the tighter they got. And I think sometimes that's like our ideas, right? The more I try and like force it, the tighter they get.
Oh, yeah.
She goes, I went over and I realized I needed some outside help. And the whole thing, she was trying to teach me about outside help. And she goes, I first laid them out on a cloth. And she goes, I kind of opened them and spread them out a little bit. And then she goes, I went and got some outside help. I went and got a big magnifying glass, right? She went over and got the magnifying glass, and she looked at it, and she could notice, the magnifying glass helped her see the easy ones. She goes, well, there was a couple that were easy. So she got the easiest one first. And then she got the second easiest one. And then she got the third easiest one. And by the time she got to the fourth and fifth one, they almost fell apart. And I thought to myself, what a great metaphor for what we do, right? Getting a coach like you have, getting outside help to help you with the book, and start to look at the ideas, right? And start to notice that, all right, I sat down, I've got this idea, I want to start to go on it, and getting some help, seeing some paths that didn't work, right? And all of a sudden you see one that does, and then the inspiration comes. And it rejuvenates the whole idea. And just like her, as soon as you get the one pulled out, it's like, oh, wow, that's making it a lot easier.
Oh, I love that story.
I thought so too.
Really cool.
I thought it was a great story too.
That's interesting. You ran into her yesterday, and then we were talking about this today, and relating it to my story. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, she's got wisdom, and not only that, she writes cartoons. So she sends me cat cartoons. I was on a Zoom call with her, and it was a Zoom call where she was telling me the story, and she was writing me cat cartoons. She sends me cat cartoons like once or twice a month that are really funny, and she loves cats. So Carol, the cat cartoon lady. So that being said, so keep going about the book. You get inspired. You work with the folks to start to write the book. Let's go back a little bit about your history, because you've got a great business history. The stuff that you've done throughout your career has been pretty dynamic. Let's get the audience kind of up to speed about who you are and how you got into the book writing business.
I was a kid that was raised outside of Philadelphia in a great family. From the time I was 4 years old, Anthony, I just had a love of trucks. We lived across the street from a construction company, and in the summer times I would sit on the curb and I would watch these guys bring their trucks back at the end of the day. And I was just so sort of enamored with, the smell and the dust and the sounds. And I thought to myself, man, that's something I want to do. My dad was a truck driver as well, but I never got to go to work with him. So I could only imagine, what he was doing. And I kind of lived that through these guys across the street. And they were so nice. They would park their trucks and they would come over and give me something out of the, left over from their lunch, or maybe a quarter or a nickel or a dime or whatever it was those days. And it just kind of like an entrepreneurial seed was planted in me, when I was sitting on that curb. And then for a long time, it went away. I went to high school, I went to college, and in those days, that was, in the early 80s, early to mid 80s, there wasn't really a lot of, I don't remember anybody in my fraternity, for example, wanting to be an entrepreneur or saying, I'm going to go start and own a business. It was all about getting a job, or going further in school, getting your MBA, becoming a lawyer, becoming a doctor, whatever. And that just wasn't what I wanted to do. So when I was I actually dropped out of college my second semester, freshman year, because I had a job at this local cemetery. And at the cemetery, I got to, help dig holes to bury people, cut the grass, shovel, plow the snow, do all those kinds of things. And I thought, why do I need a college education, man? I got a great job here. I can buy, fancy clothes, and I have a color TV and nobody else does, and that kind of thing. And fortunately, the brother who ran this parish cemetery, convinced me to go to school by telling me he wouldn't hire me, keep me employed after the next summer. So I went back to school, and what really changed my life was between junior and senior year, I got a job driving a garbage truck. You think, why would it? Anyway, it was just a love of trucks. I wanted a job driving a truck. I got a job driving a garbage truck, and it was amazing. I learned to love the trash business. And so I went to the owner. It was a privately run company, and I said, what do I need to do? what do I need to do to get a career in this? Not just, be a driver. I don't mind driving, but what do I need to do to get a career? And he told me to go interview with the big boys, because they would, maybe they have resources to have, people like you come in and train them and that kind of stuff. He's like, I don't have that here. We're a family business, that kind of thing. So I did. I got hired by one of the big trash companies and as a management trainee, and I went around, I think 6 different places in 5 years. My whole motto was, if you ask me to do something, I'm going to say yes, whatever it is. Yes, yes, yes. And ultimately I ended up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, by saying yes. And then I was here. I'm still in the Wisconsin. I'm still in the Milwaukee area. I was here for a little over a year, like 15 months, and they fired me, Anthony, from that job. And so I had no idea what to do. I hardly knew anybody here. I hadn't been here very long. My wife and I got married just before we moved here. So it was like, nice job, there, and I was really at a loss, and I went to do what I thought I should do. And I applied for a job and got hired 30 days later. Like, here's my new job, cause that's what you're supposed to do, get a job. And, fortunately, I didn't last at that job more than 30 days, but it was really fortunate in retrospect, because there was a guy there, his name was Don, and he was just a complete a-hole. He was a jerk. And because he was a jerk, I just couldn't handle working there. And I left, and it made me feel like a real loser, because I got fired from my job. I get a new job, and 30 days later, I quit that new job. I'm thinking to myself, what the heck? A few days after that, a guy that I had been working with at the company I got fired from sent me a message. He said, hey, if you want to start a business together, give me a call, because I want to talk about it. And I was like, where did that come from? Because I didn't know this guy very well. So I went to his house, and we had dinner and some Miller Lite and Miller High Lights. And we started talking about what a good idea this would be. And he'd been a farmer all his life. And I always kind of put these things together. That seed was sort of placed in me when I was 4 years old. And this farmer came along many years later, and he gave me whatever I needed to germinate that seed. And we put a business plan together, and we got the business started and off the ground about 6 months later.
Wow. So you go through starting up a waste management company. I work for, I think, when you and I talked, I worked for a very, very famous waste management guy. And, he started the same thing. His story is very similar to that, with $5,000 and a prayer, and, goes around knocking on doors and doing that. Your early days of being an entrepreneur, like anybody who's an entrepreneur, there's some ups and there's some downs. And, so talk to me a little bit about that. So are you driving the truck? Are you doing the accounting? Are you doing the accounting and driving the truck? Okay.
Yes, and yes, and yes. And if you ask me if I'm doing more and more and more, the answer is yes, and yes, and yes. So Butch is the farmer who I ended up partnering with. And Butch and I had very complementary skills. He was the kind of guy that, like a lot of farmers, they can make anything, they can fix anything, they can fabricate anything. They're just super talented and skilled that way. They can figure out problems. And I had very little mechanical aptitude, but I had learned something working for Browning Ferris, which was the company I worked for, and going around to all these different operations and being exposed to all different parts of the business. So I knew a little bit about accounting. I knew a little bit about HR. I knew a little bit about routing. I knew a little bit about a lot of things, but it was just the two of us. And so, yes, here was the thing. Butch was the main driver, and then I would drive whenever we needed a second person. And then when I was driving full-time, then we would hire a driver, and I would go back to part-time driving. And so I was sales, accounting, collections, marketing, answering the phone, you name it, sending the invoices, going to the mailbox, going to the bank to put the checks in, just that's the stuff that you do, and I loved it. Yeah. I loved doing that. I loved doing all of that. And it's interesting because in the book, I split the book up into 4 parts. And the first part is dream. And that's the part I'm describing now. It's like when you get this thing off the ground and you're like, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever, And the second part is grind. and grind is what often replaces the dream. And then the third part is break, which is what happened to me. I literally, broke. And then the fourth part is break through. So you break, what do you do to get, are you going to stay broken forever? Or are you going to get, to where you actually want to be? So to answer your question directly, we both did whatever we needed to do. Butch always said, it's a good thing we have strong backs because our brains.
Well, and it's such a great business because, it is a reoccurring revenue, right? But there are a lot of, there are some big boys and some big companies out there you're competing with. But, I think having that, like anything, being an entrepreneur isn't always about, I've got these really tough competitors out there, as much as the customer relationships that we build where customers actually love having you guys, right? And talk to me about that. So how do you start to build customers as you're, my guess is that you're picking up garbage in the morning and you're marketing at night?
Yeah, so we niched off a little bit. So we didn't do garbage. We started in wastewater.
That's right.
So going into factories and taking out wastewater, and then we expanded into all other kinds of services that manufacturers need that are waste related and production related. So, it's hazardous waste, sludge, cleaning machines, cleaning floors, cleaning pits, all of that stuff. But what the approach that we had was, at first we had no business, right? We had nothing. And so I'm knocking on doors all day long to try to get somebody to say, yes, give us an opportunity to do something. And that's how we got our first few clients. And then the sales part went in between the driving part. So a lot of times I would drive somewhere and I would park the truck and then I would go in, make a sales call, and then I would drive to where I was, I was actually supposed to be. And then we ended up hiring a contract salesperson, a person that I knew that came in and helped us with some of the sales as well. But sales was what I did when I wasn't doing all of the other things.
Like every business I've ever started, I look back and, like I can remember when I first started CDO Group, at the time there wasn't outsourced construction managers, right? There was no, maybe if you were a brand and you were in fourth quarter and you had a bunch of extra projects to do, and instead of hiring somebody, you might bring, hey, can I bring Bob back? He retired. Maybe, hey, Bob, can you do a couple of projects for us in the fourth quarter to help out? And I was like, I kept watching, I'd been through 6 different companies by that point. I'd worked for, some of these really smart guys, and I'd built a bunch of companies, and I realized there was a need that they were out there buying cows to get milk. All they really needed was development experts, right? They needed someone to help them do this stuff. But when I first made those first phone calls, there wasn't even a business yet, right? There wasn't even, the idea of CDO was something we sat down, we said, I could see the niche, but the audience hadn't seen it yet. I would call people and say, hey, my name's Anthony, I'm at CDO Group. We'd like to outsource your construction management work. And they were like, well, we've got a GC. No, we want to be your construction manager. And they would go, well, we've got a construction. Well, can we just do your overflow work? Anything that's over the stuff they would do? And, oh, great. And then all of a sudden, people, through the conversations I had, I started to invent the business. Right. So it invented every phone call. I would find the need, and there was a remodel here and a program over there. And all right. So they wouldn't give me the new store work, but nobody in house ever likes to do remodels. It's a pain in the neck, and it's, it interacts with operations too much, and it never goes right. And they get a lot of complaints. So they here, we'll give you guys the remodel work. And then, so that you kind of invent it every call you make. Was that your experience?
Yeah. When you were saying that, I was thinking to myself, as entrepreneurs, for example, we get so invested in our own idea and our own explanation of the idea that, we don't even see it when we're running up against a wall where someone's like, I don't get what you're saying to me, and I heard somebody say it once that you have to give a person the medicine the way that they'll take it. Right. And when you were describing that, I thought of that. Like, you got to keep changing your message or modifying it or adapting it to the ears of the listener, right? Yeah. Okay. Got it. I don't know. I most of the people that we were calling on initially, we were kind of begging. So they knew what we wanted, and they knew that they had what we wanted. So I'm not going to suggest for a second that, in the early days we were, good at crafting our message or anything. But later, what I do take a lot of pride in is later we got people to think about how to work with us in a way that they wouldn't normally think to work with us. So they might be, hiring this company to do this, sort of what you described, or this company to do this. They're very siloed or, into what they think they need. And, we tried very hard to get them to think of us as someone who could do kind of like what you said, be the construction manager, be the waste manager. It's not that we're going to do everything ourselves, but we're going to make sure that we make your life easy, and we're going to make sure that you don't have to deal with new people coming into your plant and going, well, what am I supposed to do? Can you show me what, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's exactly what happened. I mean, for me, it's exactly what happened. You start to open a dialogue, and you kind of find one little, like you said, I remember begging. I mean, I'm certain that some people gave me work. They're like, all right, if we give you a project, will you stop calling me every day? You're just at a point where you're so, I was excited about, people I'd worked with and the relationships, and people could tell that I loved doing the business. Right? I had a passion about it, and I was really good at it. I had some great relationships with contractors and all that. And as you start to invent the business, and some of them couldn't even see it. Now I could start to really work on, providing them an employee on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and then all of a sudden they could start to see how to work with me in a different way, and then all of a sudden it became really clear that companies shouldn't own cows; they should just buy milk. And today, the internal staff to run a development team is, I happen to be lucky that I saw that in 98, 97. I could see that, and that was just because I'd been through a lot of farms, right? Or I'd been through a lot of the companies, and I'd built multi-million-dollar development teams. And I realized that every time we'd break them down, and all of the knowledge that was lost because of that. And not only that, all the distraction that was created in developing the team, housing the team, manage the team. The companies I worked for sold chicken, or they were bagel companies, or they rented videos, or they were playgrounds for kids. Their core competency had nothing to do with having to operate a development team or a construction company to build their stores. They just needed someone they could trust. And once we could provide that for them, it became real clear. So it was providing a trustworthy mechanism, and that became our model. Like, hey, look, you go do what you do, right? Whatever that is, you do, and we'll take care of this, and it's done, and it'll be effective, and you can trust that instead of losing your focus. Stay focused on what you do.
Very smart.
So as you start to develop the idea, right, and you start to grow the waste management company, and you guys get now. How big do you get over what period of time?
Well, it was 22 years when we sold that business, and we were about $45 million in revenue.
Wow, that's substantial.
Yeah, it worked out well, but at the time, when I was talking about that break period, that was about 10 years in, and we were maybe 10 million or so at that time, and I thought there's no way we're going to get bigger. In fact, my thinking was we got to get smaller, because I can't handle, all of this stuff. And interestingly, what I determined was, and it didn't happen overnight, like most things don't happen overnight, Anthony, but what I determined was ultimately I call it an uncertainty valley. Like, I dropped into this valley 10 years or so in, and I didn't know how to get out. And it occurred to me that I was there because that's exactly where I designed myself to be. I talk about the grind part in the book, and grind is something most entrepreneurs are familiar with, but most of the grind you invite into your life and then you accept it and you cuddle it and you want it, until you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't know why, you start telling yourself, I don't know why I have it. It's not fair. Or you have all these, I'm entitled to something different, or all of these things. And I was playing that blame game too. And then ultimately I figured out that I got, I can't control everything that happens in my life, but almost everything that led me to the point where I was frustrated, tired, stuck, and uncertain about what to do happened because that's exactly the system I put in place. And I had to change that, right? I couldn't, if I continued with that, I would just grind myself into nothing as a person or as a leader or anything else.
Well, let's hear this, because I think this is really key. People don't see this, that I create the grind, right? I created my grind, right? And there was something about the grind that gave me some value, right? There was something about me working hard that was very, very valuable for me. It gave me a sense of value. It gave me look what I've done. And to your point, somewhere in there you start to go, okay, it's not sustainable, right? I mean, how many years can you run it 150%? And somewhere in there you start to back off. And then when you make the switch, I just recently had gone through that, where I am not the president of CDO Group. And that happened last year. And that was a dramatic change for me as a human being, right? I had to bring in a coach. And I've been working with this great coach for a while. And the woman was saying to me, she goes, we just noticed that you walk around poking at everybody. I would walk out and I'd be in my office and I would just kind of take the gun out and I'd start loading bullets up, and I'd walk out there with my 6-shooter and start 6-shooting at, different departments. Oh, look at this. Where's those sales numbers? And where's this over here? And how come that project's not turning over on time? And how come because that was, I didn't get to play general anymore. Now there's other people who did that, and they did it a little bit different than I did. And she looked at me and she goes, "You're missing significance, aren't you?" And that's a big reason why I do the podcast today, and the other companies that we started, was because I needed to take a step back and start to notice that it's okay that other people are doing this. It's time for me to serve those people. How do I help them grow? And that was a whole, I didn't know that well. I knew the grind well, right? Because I've been geared for the grind, but I hadn't been how to grow people well yet.
Anthony, so as you were telling that, I was thinking to myself, okay, yeah. So the grind makes you a hero for a while, right? You're the hero because you design a system that brings all the grind to you so that you can have the answer or, shoot the bullets or do whatever is your thing. And you're the hero, right? And then you walk away. It's like, yeah, did my job, right? Until it doesn't. Until you no longer feel like a hero, you feel like the person who's, they say that, shit runs downhill, and that's what you start to feel like, even though you created the hill and put yourself, right at the bottom. So you go from king of the hill to bottom of the hill. But from a leadership standpoint, and I talk about this in the book, when I was describing this valley, this uncertainty valley that I was in, there were a lot of revelations in there. I described one earlier. This one was, I was treating that company like it was still a baby. Like everybody in the business and the business itself was still a baby, like we were still a startup. And that's not what the business needed. So, ultimately, I was not doing my job. I'm supposed to lead this organization, and I was not leading the organization. I was caring for it or obsessing over it as if it was an infant and still needed, my attention 24/7, when I had a great team who had lots of they had their own attention and talents and skills. And I was not sort of opening the door to that. And that was a big mistake of mine. It definitely set me back, many years, I think.
I think that's a skill that takes that's like the next evolution of the entrepreneur, right? One is the bravery of getting into business, right? Getting there and stumbling and just being brave to start it. And the grind is a great spot to be in, right? Grind and you're sharpening and you're this warrior. John Bly has the transitions of a man as I go through that warrior king, that warrior part of me, that I'm a warrior. I go out there and fight these battles, but I can't do that forever. And then as I start to look at, all right, how do I want to be a reverend king, right? How do I want to let them do that? How do I create great warriors? How do I create great team members that go out and fight these battles, and I can support them and train them and give them all of the things that I never even got. So their path is easier, path is smoother. Maybe there's some gift in some of the knowledge, but overall allowing them to be the reverent part of their life, right? Really let them go out and create that. And, I had to continue to look at myself and watch out for my significant need and make sure that I wasn't getting significant being better than others, right? Allowing others to grow. And then somewhere where I noticed that about me and started saying, great, this is really about them. And when I can get some significance, allowing, when I can serve them, it was a whole nother beast in my ability to grow.
I like that, warrior to reverend. I hadn't heard that before. That's really cool.
I don't know if you ever read Iron John. It's a great book. He talks about, first of all, John Bly he's a poet. And I read a book a week, but I started reading John Bly, and it's a difficult book to read at first. And I'm reading this thing, and I'm like 2 weeks into it, I'm 3 weeks into it, I'm like, oh, what the heck? I'm stumbling through the reading. And I'm more frustrated that I can't read the book. And then I found him on YouTube, and I heard him talk. And once I heard him talk, it became so much easier for me to read the book. Then it flowed. I realized
because you had his language now.
Yeah, I got his language, the way that he talked. But it was fun about it was he's got a couple different roles as we go through it. He's got he talks about the little boy that we are, and then the monster that we are. The monster inside of each and every one of us, and he's got this great story that takes you through this monster they find in the lake, which is really our inner beast, and that part that we lock up, and the little boy and the ball, and it talks about your little boy inside of you, and there's a monster, and it's got this all the different components of the male psyche, and then the key to your sexuality is hidden under your mom's pillow, so it gets a little bit off in this Freudian thought.
Okay.
And so then you go off and you become the warrior that you are, but then you come back and you have to realize that the monster says, hey, go get the key from under your mom's pillow, and you go get that. So it's a little bit out there, but it's a great thought process, and to start to look at ourselves. And I go, I can relate to the different components of me as a man, the part of me that was the great warrior. And I love that. In my office, I've got the picture of the Spartan 300s, and the 300 Spartans, and Leonidas, and I love that part of my being as a man. There's this really strong part of me, but there's also a very sensitive man, right? Who today allows those other warriors to be. I've got great leaders that run the organizations that I have, and watching them, and they all do it a little bit differently. Some are really aggressive, and they're all different, and paying homage to the way they do it rather than they've got to do it my way, because a lot of my insecurities came when people did it differently than I did it, right? In that spot where they would, well, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Well, I would check them, and I would test them, and I would check on them, and a lot of times the leaders would say, Anthony's going to argue with you, right? He's going to make you prove it, and some of that was great. Some of that is valuable, right? Because I want them to own the way they are and the way they're leading their people. I want them to own that, but there's also part of that can also be a little insecure, because I want them to prove that my way's not there, and they got to show me that they've got a thought about this. And the more and more I let go, it is still today an uncomfortable experience, not being in control of the world. Because when I was a grinder, Because as soon as something goes bad, let me jump in here. I'll come down to your department. We'll come over and we'll come work on this. Yeah. And they're looking at me like, yeah, we don't need you. We'll get through the grind ourselves. And listen, I'll come down on Tuesday. We can do a whole day of calling people. We could do that.
We're both at a place, I think, where, we're not going to be the people who transform our businesses, right? Because we got so much baggage about what should be done, the way it should be done, the way I've always done it, that kind of thing, that it's tough for us to have the eyes that a new person, eyes and ideas that a newer person or a different person would have. And yeah, I feel like I'm glad you've done that, because that's probably put your businesses in, the leadership's still important, your ultimate leadership and direction, but it's probably put the businesses in a better spot to, to thrive and transform and do whatever they need to do to compete and grow.
Yeah, but just like you were talking about, though, it is taking me, to be a leader, I believe, takes so much work. And if you're going to be a leader and continue to grow as a man, as a leader, or as a giver to your company, I have brought in numerous coaches, and I just was doing one-on-ones with my leadership group this week, and I said, it's been a minute since we've had, since the beginning or middle of COVID, we haven't had a business coach in here for the whole leadership body, and we've always brought in great leadership, great coaching folks that have us just look at it a little bit different. If it was a diversity study or a skill sets or time management or productivity. We've had all kinds of coaches that bring all kinds of different thought ideas in. And I think that's most things. You got to be, constantly working at this level. I think it's even more work than I did when I was younger, doing the grind work. Now it's the books I read, the conversations I have. That's why I love the podcast, is I get to be with all these people that have these great ideas.
So let me ask you something, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Explore this. So one of the things that, for me, turned out to be like really key to getting me out of this valley and to getting into the breakthrough stage, Anthony, was the subtitle of the book is How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck. And that sounds terrible, right? But so here's where my mindset was, and I think it contributed to the grind. You tell me what you think. But when I first read Jim Collins' book, it was like 2001 that came out, Good to Great, and in there he talks about a level 5 leader and servant leadership and all of these things. And I read that, and I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I so want to be a level 5 leader. I so want to be servant. I think I'm already on my way there, but I want to do more of it. And what I didn't understand about it, or what I don't think I understood about it, is that I could not be a servant leader or selfless or appear to be selfless to everybody else unless I really understood what was important for me. So I was doing it all wrong. I thought, well, the more I help people and the more I get in people's grills and the more I do all of these things, that's being the selfless leader. That's putting everybody else first. That's the job I'm supposed to be doing. But the fact was that, for me at least, that was keeping me from the job I was supposed to be doing. And it was grinding. It was part of that grind that we talked about. And when I finally discovered that in order for me to make my future my property, I had to get selfish. I had to know where I wanted to go. I had to know who I wanted to be. I had to do all of these things because I couldn't lead anybody somewhere if I didn't know where I was going in the first place. And being selfless, or being servant, at least in the way I was defining servant, was keeping me from doing that. What do you think?
No,
about that?
I love. I felt like, as you were talking about, I could feel that experience. As I tried to go spin everybody's plates with them, it was this never-ending mountain with no top experience, and I'm like, no, this is it's exhausting. And the truth was, I was always taking their power away, right? As I started to, and one of the big lessons I got was, it seemed to happen around kids. My son was turning 16. He was there, and my daughter just now he's 19, my daughter's 16, and I wanted to like just control them so much. And someone sat down with me and goes, look, dude, you got one thing. Your job is done. Your job is don't die. You're making up all this other stuff. You got to get protected from this. You got to do all that. He goes, the same thing in business. Don't let the business die. Your job is not, it's going to go through what it goes through. And the people who run the business today, your job is to make sure it doesn't die, right? Make sure you don't do anything so catastrophe that it doesn't die. But you got to, and it's hard to sit, and I would lock now. In fact, if you come to my office today, it's still the door shut. And not that anybody can come in anytime they want, but it prevents me from going out there, right? It says, is this need to be done by you? Is there something else that do you need to go jump in that person's business? And, I try to leave it to the one-on-ones when I meet with them. Every once in a while, I'll notice a topic that I definitely feel is time sensitive, or, an opportunity to do. Today, I feel like the most valuable I can do is I'm the cheerleader for the individuals. I find myself doing spending time with the different employees at the company. I'll pull some aside and get an hour with them, and I meet with the leaders of the company one-on-one for an hour a week, and I get their strategy. Right. And that's really, and we talk through, and I get to know them really, that hour every week. We get pretty intimate. I do it in a closed place. We have no phones. I'm very, very intentional about their one-on-ones. I do not let anybody interrupt us. And every once in a while, somebody will, and they'll get, that's not okay, because I don't get lots of time with them. And when I do, we are together. So it's complete involvement together. And we spend time knowing each other, I make sure I see them as the leaders they are. And then, from there, I, hear what they're up to. And if I get any adjustments, I can make or offer. Great, I can do that there. But that allows me to trust. It's there now. Every once in a while, I can notice I'm in a meeting and I have to bite my tongue. I so much want to tell somebody they're doing something wrong, but I've just noticed that there's and sometimes I can't. I got to be truthful. That there are some times where I've been in meetings, and even at my best self, I got to watch out for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Right? If I'm as a man, if I'm in those stages and I'm in a meeting and something comes up, like I'm really tough about turning over projects on time. If a project is not on time or a budget, it's like there's a couple pet peeves that are mine, and people know it about me. I'm like, look, you don't want to miss a project with me, because I believe that there's nothing we can't fix if I know about it fast enough, and the team that we have will go out and fix whatever. So it just, but that's experience. So that's experience is that noticing myself as a man where I have those triggers, right? So around turnovers or time or a problem, and then telling on myself with that leadership body, the people who run the company, and say, hey, look, this is. You'll notice that sometimes I'll pop up there and sometimes they look at me like, there he goes. He must be tired. And in fact, they'll say, if I'm doing a one-on-one with somebody, they go, do you need a nap first? On Thursdays, it's relentless. Every Thursday, I will leave my office and go take a nap at lunchtime. And I don't know why. By the time Thursday comes around, I'm up at 4:00 in the morning. I do my walks. I work out. By Thursday midday, I'm a little tired. And if I have a couple one-on-ones on Thursday afternoons, they do not want me around when I'm tired. They're like, go take a nap.
Take a nap, grab a Snickers. Like that commercial where Snickers transforms you into a better person. I like how so now your role, you've adapted your role to be, about mission, culture, development, right? Maybe and some other things, and that's it. That's yes, I'm going to every so often. I'm going to get something's going to bug me, and I'm going to, but you've done a smart thing, right? You've gotten into this is where your focus is. And everyone else is focusing on the things that they're best suited to focus on at this point in the company's life or in your life or in their career or whatever.
For sure. And I think that's a part of, you've been their leader for a long time. And they love being around that, if there's something about just being there for them and them knowing that and seeing them. I think that's a big part of it is when I can see people, right? When they're seen. And you know what I mean by that, by being seen, like it's not just about, hey, I see you physically, but them, what the body of work they're doing, what they're going on, the frustrations they're having.
Care.
Yeah, care. Yeah. It's exactly right. Being seen, caring about it, knowing that, people put, especially when you're a leader of a company, people put a lot of work into your company over time. And yes, they get a paycheck. Yes, that's great. But, today there's a lot of paychecks out there that people can have. And I think it's really important to people to be seen.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Well, we've got a long way, and I know that we've got a lot going on, and I don't want to run out of time. But let's kind of get the book. The book's coming out on November 30th.
That's right.
November 30th. Yeah. And where are we going to see it? Amazon. It's going to be all over.
Yeah, it's going to be everywhere. So it's called Owner Shift, and the shift is kind of cool because it's inverted on the title, and it kind of represents that. Sometimes you as an entrepreneur or a leader, you don't want to change easily. Sometimes you have to be dragged, and that's kind of what it felt like to me. So the book kind of says that, but the subtitle is How Getting Selfish Got Me Unstuck, and we thanks for having the chance to throw that by you to see what you thought of my thinking on that. But yeah, it's available on Amazon. You can get it on my website at MikeMalatesta.com.
Spell that for everybody. Spell that for everybody.
Sure. Mike, MikeMalatesta.com.
Thank you.
You can also listen to my podcast. It's called How Did It Happen, where I share amazing success stories that activate the greatness in you. And yeah, check me out on LinkedIn. So Anthony, thanks so much for having me on and having this opportunity to get to know you better and talk about me and my book, and hopefully we shared some good value for your listeners.
Mike, it's great. I love the stories, and I look forward to us doing this more. I'd love to make sure that as the book comes out, our audience goes out and gets a copy of it, really supports you in this endeavor. It's been great talking to you in the pre-meetings we had. Great. And I look forward to us having more podcasts. I'll come over and do one over on your podcast, whenever you need. Whenever you can.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. I love it. Thanks a lot for being on here, and I'm grateful.